Julian Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse office, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. At 37, he had built Blackwood Technologies from a college dorm room project into a billion-dollar empire. His sharp jawline, intense gray eyes, and perfectly tailored suits made him a fixture in business magazines and society pages. Yet none of his achievements filled the hollow space that had existed in his chest for the past 2 years. Today was supposed to bring closure. His attorney, Richard Morrison, had scheduled the final divorce meeting with Arya Starling, the woman who had vanished from his life without explanation. The marriage had lasted only 18 months, but the absence had felt like an eternity. Julian had convinced himself that ending things legally would allow him to move forward, to finally stop wondering what went wrong. The intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice crackled through. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Starling has arrived. She's on her way up." Julian straightened his tie and settled into the leather chair behind his massive desk. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. He would be professional, cold even. Sign the papers, write the checks stipulated in their prenuptial agreement, and never look back. The elevator chimed, and Richard opened the conference room door. Nothing could have prepared Julian for what happened next. Arya walked in and time seemed to freeze. She looked different, yet achingly familiar. Her auburn hair cascaded in soft waves past her shoulders, and she wore a simple blue dress that highlighted her green eyes. But it was not Arya who stole Julian's breath. It was the 2 small children holding her hands. Twin toddlers, a boy and a girl, stood on either side of her. They could not have been more than 2 years old. The little girl wore a pink dress with white ribbons, while the boy sported tiny jeans and a striped shirt. But their clothing was not what made Julian's world tilt on its axis. It was their faces. They were perfect miniature copies of Julian himself. The same gray eyes, the same dark hair with a slight wave, the same strong jawline, already visible in their tiny features. Even the way the little boy tilted his head was exactly how Julian stood when deep in thought. Richard Morrison cleared his throat, clearly as shocked as Julian. Arya met Julian's stunned gaze with quiet determination. She guided the children to the chairs across from his desk, helping them climb up before taking her own seat. "Hello, Julian," she said softly. Her voice was steady, but he detected a tremor beneath the calm surface. Julian could not speak. His eyes moved from Arya to the children and back again. The little girl smiled at him, revealing tiny dimples that matched his own. The boy clutched a small stuffed bear and studied Julian with curious, intelligent eyes. "This is Emma," Arya said, touching the girl's shoulder gently, "and this is Ethan. They're your children, Julian. Our children." The words detonated in the room like a bomb. Richard gasped audibly. Julian gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. 1,000 questions exploded in his mind, but only one word escaped his lips. "What?" Arya reached into her purse and pulled out 2 birth certificates, sliding them across the polished mahogany surface. Julian snatched them up, his hands shaking as he read. Emma Rose Starling and Ethan James Starling. Born 26 months ago. Father, unknown. Unknown? Julian's voice was dangerously low. "You left the father as unknown?" "I had my reasons," Arya replied, her composure cracking slightly. "I was protecting them from their own father." Julian stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "You disappeared 2 years ago. No note, no explanation, nothing. I searched for you everywhere. And now you show up with my children I knew nothing about, and expect me to just accept this." Emma whimpered at the raised voices, and Ethan wrapped his small arm around his sister protectively. The gesture pierced Julian's anger like an arrow. He immediately softened his tone, though fury still simmered beneath the surface. Arya lifted Emma onto her lap, soothing her with gentle whispers. "I did not come here to fight. I came to finalize the divorce, as agreed. But I thought you had the right to know about Emma and Ethan before we signed the papers." Julian circled around his desk, unable to stay still. His mind raced through memories of their time together. Their whirlwind romance had begun at an art gallery opening where Arya had been showcasing her jewelry designs. She was a talented artist, creating intricate pieces that galleries across the city featured. Julian had been immediately captivated by her creativity, her passion, her warmth. She was everything his cold corporate world was not. They had married 6 months after meeting, against the advice of his family and business associates. His mother, Victoria Blackwood, had been particularly vocal in her disapproval. Arya came from a middle-class background, worked with her hands, and had no connections to their social circle. Victoria had made her disdain clear at every opportunity. The marriage had been intense and passionate. Arya brought color and joy into Julian's structured life, but slowly, the pressure from his family and the demands of his business had created cracks in their foundation. Julian had spent more time at the office, often canceling plans with Arya. He had dismissed her concerns about his mother's cruel comments, telling her to ignore Victoria's snobbery. Then one morning, he had woken to find her gone. Her clothes, her jewelry, tools, everything vanished. No note, no call, nothing. Julian had hired investigators, but Arya had covered her tracks well. After months of searching, he had given up, channeling his pain into expanding his company. The divorce papers had been filed after the required separation period. Now she sat before him with 2 children who were undeniably his. The resemblance was so strong that no DNA test was necessary, though Julian knew he would demand one anyway. His children, he had missed their births, their first words, their first steps. 2 years of their lives gone forever. A DNA test, he said flatly. We're doing a DNA test immediately, Arya nodded. I expected that. I have no problem with it. And you're not going anywhere, Julian continued, his voice taking on a commanding edge that made subordinates scramble. Not you, not them. You'll stay in New York until we sort this out. Have a life, Julian, Arya protested. We live upstate. Emma and Ethan have a routine, a home. They have a father who just found out they exist, Julian countered. You owe me this, Arya. You owe them this. The tension in the room was suffocating. Richard Morrison diplomatically suggested they take a break, but Julian waved him off. He crouched down to eye level with the twins, his heart hammering. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Emma reached out and touched his face with her tiny hand. Pretty eyes, she said in a sweet, high voice. Julian felt something crack inside his chest. He had built an empire, conquered markets, negotiated billion-dollar deals. Okay, but this small gesture from his daughter undid him completely. Ethan, emboldened by his sister, climbed down from his chair and walked over to Julian, offering him the stuffed bear. Bear, he said simply. Julian took the toy, his throat tight with emotions he did not know how to process. These were his children, his blood, and he had missed so much already. He stood, his decision made. I have a property in Tribeca, a townhouse. It's been vacant since I bought it last year. You and the children will stay there. I'll have it fully furnished and stocked within 24 hours. Julian, I can't just uproot their lives, Arya began. You already did that when you left, he interrupted, his voice hard but not cruel. Now you're giving me a chance to know my children. The divorce is postponed indefinitely. We have a lot to discuss, Arya. And this time, you are not running away. Arya looked at Emma and Ethan, then back at Julian. She saw the determination in his gray eyes, the same stubborn resolve that had built his empire. She also saw something else, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She saw the flicker of the man she had fallen in love with, the man she had never stopped loving despite everything. Fine, she agreed quietly. But we need ground rules. This is about Emma and Ethan, not about us. Julian's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with the same electricity that had brought them together years ago. Whatever you say, he replied, though they both knew that their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning again. The Tribeca townhouse was a masterpiece of modern luxury. Within 24 hours, Julian had transformed the empty space into a fully equipped home. Designers had installed custom furniture, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and a nursery that looked like something from a fairy tale. Toys filled the playroom, organic food stocked the refrigerator, and security cameras monitored every entrance. Arya walked through the space with Emma and Ethan, feeling overwhelmed. The twins squealed with delight at the colorful playroom, immediately diving into the mountain of new toys. She watched them through the doorway, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Is everything satisfactory? Julian appeared beside her, hands in his pockets. He had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more approachable than she remembered. It's too much, Arya said honestly. They're just children. They don't need all this. They're my children, Julian corrected gently, and they deserve everything I can give them. The DNA results had come back that morning, confirming what everyone already knew. Julian Blackwood was the biological father of Emma, Rosé, and Ethan James. The news had sent ripples through his corporate world and social circles. But Julian had issued a single statement through his publicist and refused all further comment. Over the next week, Julian established a routine. He arrived at the townhouse every morning at 7, bringing fresh pastries and coffee. He had cleared his schedule, delegating responsibilities to his executives in a way that shocked everyone who knew him. The man who once worked 16-hour days now spent his mornings on the floor. Building block towers with Ethan and having tea parties with Emma, Arya watched this transformation with wonder and suspicion. She had seen Julian in business mode, charming and ruthless. But this version of him, the one who let Emma paint his nails pink and listened patiently to Ethan's babbling stories, was new. It reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with. Before the walls had gone up between them, one evening, after the twins were asleep, Arya found Julian in the kitchen making tea. The domestic scene felt surreal. He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing in a way that sent electricity up her arm. We need to talk about what happened, Julian said, his gray eyes serious. Why did you really leave? Arya wrapped her hands around the warm mug, gathering her courage. I was pregnant when I left. I had just found out that morning. I was going to tell you that night after you came home from work, so why didn't you? Julian's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Because I overheard a conversation, Arya continued, the memory still painful. Your mother called that afternoon. You put her on speaker in your office? I was bringing you lunch as a surprise. I heard everything. Julian's jaw tightened. What did you hear? She said the marriage was a disaster, that I was dragging down your reputation and the company's stock, that you needed to end things before I could trap you with a pregnancy. Arya's voice cracked. And you agreed with her, Julian. You said I was a mistake, that you had been foolish to marry someone so beneath your station. The color drained from Julian's face. He set down his cup so hard the tea sloshed over the rim. I never said that. I heard you, Arya insisted, tears forming. My mother said those things, Julian explained urgently, moving closer. But I did not agree. I told her she was wrong, that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Did you leave before the conversation ended? Arya thought back to that terrible day. She had been so hurt by the initial words that she had fled, unable to listen anymore. I left when she called me a gold digger and you didn't immediately defend me. I did defend you, Julian said, frustration and pain mixing in his voice. I told her if she ever spoke about you that way again, I would cut her out of my life completely. I told her I loved you more than any business deal or family approval. Arya, that conversation ended with me telling my mother she was no longer welcome in our home. The revelation hit Arya like a physical blow. She had been wrong. She had run without hearing the full truth. But you were always working, always choosing the company over me, because I was trying to prove to everyone that I could have both, Julian admitted. My father built Blackwood Technologies, and when he died, everyone doubted I could maintain his legacy. I was working myself to death to prove them wrong. But I never stopped loving you. When you disappeared, I nearly lost my mind. They stood in the kitchen, years of misunderstanding hanging between them. Julian reached out and gently wiped a tear from Arya's cheek. The touch was tender, familiar, and it ignited something they had both tried to suppress. I'm sorry, Arya whispered. I should have talked to you. I should have trusted you enough to stay and fight. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't my priority, Julian replied, his thumb tracing her jawline. You were always my priority. I just didn't know how to show it. The space between them disappeared. Julian pulled Arya into his arms and she melted against him, feeling safe for the first time in years. The kiss that followed was desperate and sweet, filled with longing and regret and hope. It was a kiss that spoke of second chances and deep, enduring love. They broke apart breathless. Arya rested her forehead against Julian's chest, listening to his racing heartbeat. "This is complicated," she murmured. "I don't care," Julian said fiercely. "I lost you once. I'm not losing you again." Over the following days, they fell into a new rhythm. Julian continued his morning visits, but now they lingered over coffee, talking about everything they had missed. He told her about the emptiness of his success without her. She told him about the struggles of single motherhood. Working from home, designing jewelry while caring for infant twins. The physical attraction between them was undeniable. Stolen glances became lingering touches. Accidental brushes in the hallway became purposeful embraces. One night, after putting the twins to bed together, they gave in to the passion that had been building. It was different from before, deeper somehow. They made love with the knowledge of what they had lost and the determination not to lose it again. But Arya still held back from fully committing. The pain of the past was too fresh, the fear of being hurt too real. Julian sensed her hesitation and knew he needed to prove himself worthy of her trust. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Victoria Blackwood demanded a family dinner to meet her grandchildren. Julian initially refused, but Arya surprised him by agreeing to go. She wanted to face the woman who had nearly destroyed their marriage. The Blackwood estate on Long Island was as imposing as Arya remembered. Victoria greeted them at the door, her expression carefully neutral as she looked at Emma and Ethan, the twins. Sensing the tension, clung to their parents. Dinner was painfully formal. Victoria made polite conversation, but her disapproval was evident in every glance at Arya. Finally, over dessert, she struck. "I assume you've come back for a proper settlement," Victoria said coldly to Arya. "Julian is a very wealthy man now. I'm sure you've calculated what your children are worth." Julian's hand slammed on the table. "Mother, stop." "I'm simply being practical," Victoria continued. "She left you once. She'll leave again once she has enough money. It's what women like her do." Arya felt the familiar sting of tears but refused to let them fall. Before she could respond, Julian stood, his voice like ice. "You paid her to leave." The accusation hung in the air. Victoria's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "I hired investigators," Julian said quietly, dangerously. "After Arya disappeared, I had them dig into everything. They found a wire transfer from one of your personal accounts to Arya's bank account 2 days before she left. $50,000. I couldn't understand why she would take money from you. Now I do." "You bought her silence." Victoria's composure cracked. "I was protecting you. She was pregnant and planning to trap you." "She was my wife," Julian roared, "and she was carrying my children. You had no right." Arya stood slowly, her voice shaking but clear. "You came to me the day I found out I was pregnant. You told me Julian was planning to divorce me, that he had already consulted attorneys. You said if I left quietly, you would give me enough money to start over and keep the baby. You said if I stayed, Julian would fight me for custody and I would lose everything." The truth spilled out like poison. Victoria had manipulated them both, exploiting Arya's insecurity and her love for Julian. She had made Arya believe that leaving was the only way to protect her unborn children. Julian's face was a mask of fury and pain. "You destroyed my family. You stole 2 years of my children's lives from me." "I was protecting the Blackwood name," Victoria insisted. "You were protecting your own pride," Julian corrected. "And now you've lost me. Permanently." He took Arya's hand and called for the twins. They left the estate without looking back. Emma and Ethan safely buckled into their car seats. The drive back to Manhattan was silent except for the twins' chatter from the back seat. Arya stared out the window, processing everything that had been revealed. Julian's hands gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight with residual anger. When they arrived at the townhouse, Julian helped carry the sleeping twins upstairs. They worked in synchronized silence, changing Emma and Ethan into pajamas and tucking them into their beds. In the dim glow of the nightlight, Julian kissed each child's forehead. Whispering promises they could not hear, Downstairs, Arya poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Julian. They sat on the couch, exhaustion settling over them both. "I can't believe she did that," Arya said finally. "I can't believe I let her manipulate me." "She's a master manipulator," Julian replied bitterly. "She's controlled people her entire life, but never again. I meant what I said. She's out of our lives. Julian, she's still your mother. And Emma and Ethan's grandmother." "A grandmother who tried to erase them before they were born," Julian countered. "No, she doesn't deserve access to our children. We're children." The phrase hung between them, filled with possibility. Arya set down her wineglass and turned to face him fully. "What are we doing?" she asked softly. "The divorce papers are still unsigned. We're living in this strange limbo. We need to figure out what happens next." Julian took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I know what I want to happen next. I want to tear up those divorce papers. I want to be a real family with you, Emma and Ethan. I want morning chaos and bedtime stories and everything in between. I want you, Arya. I never stopped wanting you." "It's not that simple," Arya protested, though her heart was racing. "We hurt each other. We failed once. We were sabotaged," Julian corrected. "And we were young and stupid. I put my work before you and you didn't trust me enough to stay and fight. But we're different now. I'm different. I've spent 2 years living in a world that meant nothing without you in it. I won't make the same mistakes." "How can I know that?" Arya's voice broke. "How can I trust that you won't wake up one day and realize we're too different, that I don't fit into your world?" Julian set down his wine and cupped her face in his hands. "Because my world is empty without you. Do you know what I've realized these past few weeks? Every success I've had means nothing if I can't share it with you. Every dollar I've made is worthless if I can't use it to give you and our children the life you deserve." He pulled out his phone and opened his email, showing her the screen. "This is my resignation letter to the board of Blackwood Technologies. I'm stepping down as CEO." Arya's eyes widened in shock. "What? Julian? No? That company is your life." "It was my life when I had nothing else," Julian said firmly. "But now I have everything. I have you and Emma and Ethan. I'll still be chairman, still have a say in major decisions, but I'm hiring someone else to run the day-to-day operations. I want to be present for my children. I want to coach Ethan's future soccer games and attend Emma's dance recitals. I want to have dinner with you every night." Tears streamed down Arya's face. "You would do that? Give up that much control?" "I'm not giving anything up," Julian insisted. "I'm gaining everything that matters. The only question is whether you'll let me, whether you'll give us another chance." Arya looked into his gray eyes, the same eyes she saw every day in her children's faces. She saw sincerity, love, and determination. She saw the man she had married, the man she had never stopped loving despite the pain. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm terrified of getting hurt again." "I'm scared too," Julian confessed. "I'm terrified of losing you again. But I'm more terrified of not trying. Give me a chance to prove that I've changed. Give us a chance to build the marriage we should have had the first time." Arya made her decision. She leaned forward and kissed him, pouring all her hope and fear and love into that single gesture. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try again." The next morning, Julian arrived with more than just pastries. He brought a jewelry box. Inside was not an engagement ring, but something even more meaningful. It was the first piece of jewelry Arya had ever sold, a delicate silver bracelet with intertwined hearts. She had thought it lost years ago. "I bought it that night at the gallery," Julian explained as he fastened it around her wrist. "The night we met. I've kept it all this time. It reminded me of what I fell in love with, your talent, your creativity, your heart." Arya touched the bracelet, overwhelmed. "I thought some stranger owned this." "I was that stranger who became your husband," Julian said. "And now I want to be your husband again. Properly this time." They spent the day as a family. Julian took them to Central Park, where Emma and Ethan chased pigeons and played on the swings. They had ice cream that dripped down the twins' chins and laughed when Ethan tried to share his cone with a confused squirrel. They were just another family enjoying a beautiful day. It was perfect. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Julian and Arya sat down with the divorce papers. Together, they tore them into pieces, watching the fragments flutter into the fireplace. "I want to renew our vows," Julian said. "A real ceremony this time, with our children there. I want to marry you again, Arya, and spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." "You already deserve me," Arya said softly. "Because you love our children? Because you're willing to change? Because even after everything, my heart still chose you." 3 months later, they stood in the same gallery where they had first met. Arya wore a simple white dress that Emma had helped choose, complete with a flower crown the little girl insisted her mother needed. Ethan, dressed in a tiny suit, carried the rings on a satin pillow with serious concentration. Their closest friends watched as Julian and Arya exchanged new vows. Promises built on hard-won wisdom and deeper love. When Julian kissed his bride, Emma and Ethan cheered louder than anyone else. The reception was intimate and joyful. Arya's jewelry designs decorated the space, each piece telling a story of pain transformed into beauty. Julian gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about second chances and the family that had saved him from a life of empty success. As the evening wound down, Arya stood on the gallery balcony, watching Julian dance with Emma while Ethan clapped along. Her heart was so full it ached. They had been broken, manipulated, and separated. But love had brought them back together, stronger than before. Julian caught her eye and smiled. It was that devastating smile that had captured her heart years ago. He mouthed 3 words, "I love you." Arya smiled back, touching the silver bracelet on her wrist. She had everything she had ever wanted. A man who truly loved her, beautiful children, and a future filled with promise. The past was forgiven, not forgotten, but transformed into the foundation of something better. Victoria Blackwood had tried to destroy them, but she had failed. Love had won. Family had won. And as Arya watched her husband twirl their daughter, while their son laughed with pure joy, she knew their story was just beginning.